Fala galera do canal, me chamo Juliano. No vídeo de hoje veremos um vídeo extremamente polêmico sobre os Brics. Eu vou só falar isso, então já deixe seu like, inscreva-se no nosso canal para ajudar na divulgação e valeu!
Vladimir Putin has told Chinese leader Xi Jinping that more cooperation between their countries will ensure global security. President Xi said their two countries were upholding international equity and justice. They were meeting as the Russian president hosts this year's Brics summit. It's the first gathering of the alliance since it expanded beyond the original members, Brazil, Russia, India and China. And the group is positioning itself as a counterweight to the West. Dr. Stuart Patrick is director of the Global Order and Institutions Program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. That's a Washington, D.C. based think tank. Welcome to DW. And what's Brics for?
Well, Brics is largely a counter-hegemonic grouping. Its members are much more articulate about what they stand against and what they oppose than necessarily what they are in favor of. But it's largely an expression of frustration and grievance over the fact that the current international order to its members seems to be made by the West for the West, and that the structures of the global economy, including the hegemony of the US dollar, for instance, are things that need to go, and that there needs to be greater voice and weight for emerging countries.
And let's start there then. That founding aim of reducing the dependence of member economies on the dollar, effectively proofing them against Western sanctions. What progress have they made?
You know, very little so far. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about creating an alternative Brics currency, but of course, a lot of the members of the Brics themselves are loath to replace one currency, for instance, the US dollar, with another currency, for instance, the Chinese renminbi, to something and trying to create a payment system in which Brics countries could actually, in a digital form, conduct trade with each other without having to use dollar convertibility. But as you say, one of the big efforts here is to reduce the structural ability of the United States in particular to use its dominance of the sinews of the global financial system to be able to punish not only adversaries like Russia, but those that trade with them as well.
OK, you talked about them being more articulate in what they're against than what they're for. Does this shared antipathy to the West help Brics countries overcome their beefs with each other? Because you look at the grouping, you see India and China, Egypt and Ethiopia, as well as Iran and Saudi Arabia, who all have issues.
Yeah, this has been the problem with the Brics from the beginning. There is this ostensible antipathy towards Western domination of things like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, and some desire of countries to, for instance, emerging economies like India to become permanent members of the UN Security Council. But the problem is that once you look closer, these countries are riven with all kinds of rivalries. India and China obviously have a big border dispute going on. They are vying as the champion of the global South. The original Brics members include three very vibrant, if turbulent, democracies in Brazil, India, and South Africa, and at the same time, a group that is vehemently opposed to the West in the part of China and Russia. So even before expansion, there are huge divisions between these groups on a tremendous number of issues.
OK. So membership currently stands, we'll do the list: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the United Arab Emirates. Tell us about a couple of the big names in the queue to join and what they hope to get out of membership.
Another aspirant, which has said it wants to join, is Turkey, which will also be at the meeting. Turkey is, of course, a NATO member, so you can begin to see that the larger that the Brics membership becomes, the less a sort of geopolitical coherence it actually has.
So other institutions like G20, like the World Bank, at the moment they don't have much to fear.
Well, I don't think so. I mean, one of the big fears, of course, in the West has been that the Brics and large Brics would, in a sense, within the confines of the G20, which includes, of course, established big economies and then emerging big economies, that in some ways you would have the G7 on the one hand pitted against Brics on the other. I think that that's really unrealistic because when you think about countries that are in the queue or already in the queue could also include Indonesia eventually. These countries have no desire to form a major counter-Western coalition. They don't want to get involved in an East-West dispute. They want to be able to pursue what India calls a multi-alignment strategy. Now, on the part of the West, that really means that there needs to be some way of not being too fearful about the BRICS, welcoming it as just one other club among many, but then also taking seriously.
And for the United States and the European Union moving forward, I mean, should they change anything vis-a-vis these countries?
Well, I would say that the geopolitical landscape looks very challenging, the most challenging period, I would say, in decades. So I think that a lot is kind of waiting to see who the new U.S. president will be. So I think there are ways that the U.S. will probably try to knock down any sort of challenger to their ability to be kind of in control of the international clearing system through central banks. Nevertheless, they might be able to take what has already been learned and speed up trades. And that way they could kind of consolidate their position. But there is a great deal of interest in ways to get around this, and technology is changing this equation. So I think that the U.S. would probably try to fight these off, but we'll see that China definitely has a great deal of interest in doing that. Also, working towards peace. The narrative of this event is, to bring peace and stability in the world. So yes, Russia has invaded Ukraine. It's been a horrific war for over 1,000 days now, but this is kind of the narrative that they're trying, and rhetoric that they're cloaking themselves in.
All right, let's talk about this. Let's go to DW's Russia analyst, Konstantin Egert. He joins us now from Vilnius. Konstantin, good to see you. So how do you think Russia might flex its diplomatic muscles as the host of this summit?
Well, it tries, rather, Brent. I think that the whole idea of the summit is to show that Vladimir Putin is, if you wish, a magnetic pole in the world to which everyone who's non-Western sort of is pulled. Russia is diplomatically isolated, and for it is very important to show that it isn't. In this respect, this is not only an event that Russia is going to try to project globally, it's also very important domestically. If you look at Russian propaganda channels everywhere, their main message is that actually the majority of the world is with us. It's only the Western golden billion, so-called golden billion, is against us. And this is one of those events which is going to be spinned to the Russians as a diplomatic success and prove that Russia actually has allies.
We know that the raison d'etre of BRICS is simply to act as a counterweight to Western influence. I'm wondering, where does BRICS stand with that role, and does it aim to achieve that now?
Well, I think it's been expanding, and we know that Iran joined, that they issued invitations to other countries, but the more it expands, the more it's complicated to say what actually BRICS is about. When 20 years it was launched, it was mostly about a role in the global economy. Now it seems, at least to Russia, from the point of view of Russia, China, Iran, this is first and foremost of all an anti-American and anti-Western bloc, which you mentioned. For others, it's a way of pulling weight, kind of increasing their impact in the world, but not so much confronting the West. For example, India, which is a very important, a founding member of BRICS, does it want to confront the West? Does it want to get into conflict with the US, for example? No, it doesn't. So I think that the idea is to expand, but with this expansion, it becomes much more difficult to pull this diplomatic weight, because these countries are very frequently, they have disagreements, their interests sometimes go in diametrically opposed directions.
Yeah, I mean, we've got new members who've been invited to join. That includes Iran, Saudi Arabia. We understand Turkey, which is also a member of NATO, has expressed interest in joining. I'm wondering, if you're bringing all of those in, is that going to complicate the purpose of BRICS, or at least the purpose of BRICS as Vladimir Putin would like to see it?
Yes, definitely, Brad. Spot on. Saudi Arabia and Iran are regional rivals. And actually, confronting Iran or a conflict with Iran is one of the reasons we are talking now about the possibility of establishment of diplomatic ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia. You look at other aspirants and those who are interested in BRICS. I mean, let's say Ethiopia and Egypt, they have lots of bilateral problems. India and China, well, as one colleague rightly said, most of the time they're dealing with one problem, how not to go to war with each other. So indeed, the more members are there, the more it becomes quite, I would say, watered down club of people who generally dislike the West, but when it comes to their practical interests are very much keen to continue interacting with it.
Yeah, that's right. It's called being very flexible with who you see as your friends and your enemies, I guess. DW's Russia analyst Konstantin.
Então, geralmente aqui no canal eu posto vários vídeos que mostram mais o lado positivo dos BRICS. Já nesse ficou claro que os analistas fizeram vários asteriscos e inclusive alguns comentários meio que menosprezando essa ideia toda, que eu já acho um pouco de sacanagem. Eu particularmente aqui no canal eu não tento nem puxar muito para a direita e nem muito para a esquerda. Eu tento me manter neutro, porém quando o assunto é BRICS, cara, na minha cabeça eu gosto da ideia, acho que faz total sentido. Lógico, teve um cara aqui no canal que até comentou que gostar dos BRICS é um certo desvio de caráter. Mas, cara, na minha cabeça os BRICS fazem um total sentido. Eu não vou ter medo de falar, não, eu estava errado quando eu falei que gostava dos BRICS. Lá no futuro, caso se prove que a ideia foi completamente equivocada. Porém, no atual conjuntura, no presente, eu acho que o BRICS é uma excelente ideia. Pelo menos eu penso assim. Comente aqui embaixo o que você achou sobre tudo isso. Deixe seu like, inscreva-se no nosso canal para ajudar na divulgação e valeu!